All right, we're going to get stuck into it. David Amos from Elysium Accounting and Financial Solutions. Thank you so much for coming in, mate.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Giving us your time and your wisdom here on this sunny Melbourne Friday. This came about because we seem to have an absolute addiction to property investment in this country.
Absolutely.
And in the industries that we're in, obviously me coming from the finance and lending background, you coming from the accounting and business advisory background, we're exposed to it every day. So we see people do different things. We see them try different methods, and we wanted to get together, and I wanted to pick your brain on a few things around the number of investors these days buying through trusts, self-managed super funds. We've got a massive run of first home buyers now as well, with the government making some pretty good changes to some legislation that will allow them to access the market with a little bit more ease. So we're going to cover off on a piece on that. And that is not limited to, but the super savings scheme.
Yep.
And then I've also got a piece that I've added at the last minute that wasn't on the agenda around the first home guarantee, which just got revamped and sort of went live on the 1st of October. I reckon that's going to rattle some cages. So before we jump into it, give us a 30-second rundown of who you are and how you came to be sitting with me here today.
I think this one goes back at least 10 or 15 years when we first met, and the introduction through a joint professional friend. And we did the dance, mate, and it worked out.
You've done a few dances yet?
We got on very well, and worked out we also work well together.
Yeah.
So it's been a privilege to sit here and have you assist our clients over that period, and they've been forever grateful.
No, it's pretty crazy to see how quickly the years fly by, but here we are in year number, whatever it is. So David, thanks again, mate. What we're going to do is we're just going to cover off on where are we now? So in this country, as we know, interest rate cycle high was about 7 months ago. We went up 13 times. We've come down 3.
Yep.
How in the fuck did the 13 rate increases not deter property investors?
I think there's no one answer to that, but I think what you'll find is that a lot of people are accessing equity. And I think, Australia's had this not just over the last few years, but certainly decades, where we've had asset-rich, cash-poor. And I think that's still somewhat of the driver of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that, and like we had obviously rising and falling rates. That's just part and parcel. When you go into a property investment, you're not buying, well, typically you're not buying in the newer mentality. A lot more people do, but typically property was a safe haven to accumulate growth over a long sustained period of time. And after you get through that first, 3 to 5 years, by the time everything levels out, your property is essentially neutrally geared, if not positively geared, and it just gets easier and easier after that 5, 10, 15, 20 year. So from my point of view, being in lending, the most successful property investors we've ever come across are the ones that have bought and held for a shitload of time.
Absolutely. These are the ones that we see make the most money out of it, not those that are buying and flipping. Those are buying and holding. That's where they're truly making value.
And we'll talk about that when we get to the trust section. But the buy and hold seems to be, like you said, there's a lot of people with a lot of equity. And in the last 5 years, if we look at Queensland, South Australia, Perth, I've got some stats that we'll go through on that one later on. They're still going. We're 5 years down the line. So now you've got all of these younger and newer entrants to the investment market who also are now very equity rich. So and it's been so easy that why wouldn't you go again and again?
Literally only limited by, the interest rates somewhat, which makes people a little bit scared as they're rising. But I think there's also APRA and its responsibility that it's imposing on the banks as far as their lending criteria, whether these guys are turning the money on or turning the money off.
Yeah, which is that serviceability rate. An investor will go and buy a property. They'll be getting it at 6%. The bank's stress testing it at 9%.
Yep. Based
on APRA's advice. There are some lenders out there doing it at sort of 2%, or even 1% in some cases.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is where it's more about policy, not price for these investors, because it's more important to add another property to the portfolio than it is to try and get the lowest rate on the market.
There will forever be an appetite.
Yeah.
That's, history will show us that. And the mechanisms are still there. So there's no reason for them not to.
The confidence and behaviour from investors. So from the ATO and the ABS data, investors have the wettest appetite that they've ever had.
Yep.
You only need to scroll about 3 inches on any social media feed before someone is proposing a better way to invest and proposing a better way to add more properties to your portfolio. But then looking at rental yields, right? A lot of people are confused, and I want to get your opinion on not just the difference between rental yields and capital growth, but balancing a portfolio. In your opinion, and obviously we must warn that none of this is financial advice in nature, and everything is general.
On the legals. Anything today's financial information, not advice.
Yes. So the like, in your opinion, how would you balance a property portfolio with 3 properties? What would you be chasing and why?
Look, it all comes back to that old adage of not all your eggs in one basket. Okay. Now that could be across different asset classes or different assets in the one class. Shares are not all the same. Property is not all the same. And so if you're going to go out and buy 20 boxes, you're going to be asking for trouble.
And on that diversification piece, we wanted to share with people about SMSFs. So we're going to kick off with that. With an SMSF, the industry, let's say it's been around since 2010. It's probably been around since 2010. They enabled lending in 2007. By the time the banks and lenders got their shit together and got products on the market, 2017, we had a mass exodus. A lot of lenders left the market. Here we are. We've almost come full circle. The banks are now considering re-entering.
Yep.
It's not going away. They thought it was done. Now looking at the SMSF mentality, it's gone back to residential. In the last couple of years, we've probably done more commercial SMSFs. So let's start with that. You've said you touched on diversification. When and why would someone fit the profile of buying a commercial property in the self-managed super fund?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. We've got to come back to, I guess, ASIC requirements there as well. Okay, so ASIC will determine that, according to them, we will need at least $250,000 in a super fund before you even set up a self-managed super fund.
Yeah.
For me personally, that's probably just in excess of $300,000. And again, you've got to take a look at whether this is the right structure for you as well. And you should seek independent financial and potentially accounting advice before you do that. There's more than just using this as a mechanism to buy the property. There's your insurances. If you're going to roll out all of your money out of an industry fund or a retail fund, you're going to lose all your insurances. How is your personal health? Are you going to get that again? So there's a litany of questions that you'll need to go through before we get to that. But let's just say we tick all those boxes.
Yeah.
Then the structure itself, we've got to remember, is a trust with a whole lot of regulations on it. That's what it is. One of those regulations is when you can get your money. And secondly is, and the biggest one, it's still illegal under the legislation for a super fund to borrow money. Okay. And in order for it to either go and buy this property in your self-managed super fund, we've got to either A, have the cash, or then B, look at an installment warrant trust. They're not cheap. These are not the cheapest legal structures that you have, but yes, does give purpose to what we're doing.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, we look at that commercial property and we look at it with those that are self-employed, looking to potentially retain security over their business premise.
Which is the most common one we come across. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then again, we just got to strip that back and have that question. It's like, look, I get it. We're buying a great asset with an awesome tenant, but at some stage the tenant's going to leave. Does the property still hold up as a quality investment?
Yeah, and the commercial space is very different because you're not talking, you don't just put it on the market and someone comes along within 2 weeks and 20 people are lined up out the front to come in and take the premises.
Absolutely. It's going to be fit for purpose.
And then when you do land one, obviously the lease terms are 3 years, 4 years, 5 years with options as opposed to just 1 year of having that guaranteed tenancy. And there's not as many ridiculous rules around being a commercial landlord in comparison to the residential landlord. The residential landlord landscape, especially in Victoria, is absolutely gone insane.
Yep, tilted.
We're not even going to cover that one today. That'll just shit me. But the SMSF residential space has made a massive comeback.
Absolutely.
In the last probably 6 months. So here we are in October 25. In the last 6 months, we've seen a massive influx of residential investors, some of which have come from people that have engaged property groups and they've bought some really good quality assets. But that is a flag for me to say we need to be careful that what you mentioned earlier on, $300,000 in the super fund, that's a fairly solid balance for someone to start with. We see them at 160, 170.
ASIC has the right to go to the advisor who has let someone do that.
Yeah, most of them have done it with no advice. Yeah. So they have gone and got a no advice structure set up. You can even get them online. You can get your SMSF set up online and you will walk away with your trust. And it is borrow or lending ready. But again, without doing it with the advice piece, there are a lot of other elements you may burn yourself on. So being very careful with that. The residential side of things in the super fund, a lot of them are doing it because they just want to add that extra property to the portfolio.
Yep.
And I have seen a lot of people do it where they have not actually left any insurance in place.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, and this is one of the things that I would probably caution people that are, the SMSF strategy is amazing. It's
Absolutely.
fantastic. It's the best. It is the best tax environment you could possibly invest in, hands down.
As the tax accountant in the room, it's probably one of the very last tools I have left as a tax structure to create wealth for a client.
Yeah. And so I'm absolutely all for it, but I've seen a lot of people drain the fund. They would have to leave the liquidity test in there at the end of it, but they've got no insurances or anything like that. Now, those insurances might have been put in place when they were 30. Now they're 45. To go and get those insurances in place at that price again is not going to happen. And most of the time they're coming for the super fund because they've already maxed out their personal borrowings. So think about the toxicity in that equation when you have a property portfolio in your personal name. You got hubby, wife, a couple of kids, 3 or 4 properties, and then you go and add one in your super fund, you kill all your insurances. That is a recipe for fucking disaster.
It is, especially when you, as you say, we have a lot of these people coming to us in their mid-30s, late 30s, and then move into their mid to late 40s when they're in their most expensive part of their life with kids in high school, mortgages through the roof. You have a tragic event of any kind. It's a definite consideration.
Yeah. So I don't want to sound like a fearmonger. I have an SMSF. I've invested in the SMSF for a number of years now.
Yep.
And it's probably one of my favorite tools to invest in.
Absolutely.
And I'm 37. Right. So but
incredible.
I definitely haven't canceled my insurances. That's for sure. And the avenue is great, but to think with the mindset that it is just another way to add another property to your portfolio because you've exhausted your income in your personal name is probably a dangerous formula to operate with.
Yeah, obviously we need to take a look at that at a broader scale of wealth creation. It's as you say, it's there and available. But even the loans themselves can be tricky. These are installment warrant loans that you cannot have, or the bank cannot have any recourse back to any other asset in your self-managed super fund. But just take a look at the guarantors on that and the clauses as far as guarantees. Most of them will include the individuals there with personal guarantees.
All of them, basically, yeah. I actually saw someone's credit file the other day that had the guarantee from the super fund on the credit file, and we had to show all the evidence and prove that it was a self-managed super fund facility and that they were a personal guarantor. Now, we were lucky enough that they removed it from the personal balance sheet, but they didn't have to do that credit report.
Yeah, and that's going to affect, I imagine, lending in the future as well.
Yeah. Which brings us to the anything else that you can share on self-managed super funds that you've seen people do really well, or that you've seen?
Yeah, look, I think the key one where you can really leverage of it is that commercial property space. Okay, that the security of it and how you can be utilizing that. Absolutely. You've just got to be careful with the legislation if you're going to be doing a resi property and you want to come in and you want to do any sort of reno or works of these.
Yeah.
There is some very tricky parts of the legislation the ATO will look at, and not to go into them too hard, but the contribution rules are the big ones. If you go in and you're putting a kitchen, and even if you've ticked all the boxes and had all the monies come directly out of the super fund, the ATO is going to take a look at your effort, and they're going to put a time based on that, and that they regard that as a contribution and could fall in foul of the excess contribution cap. So buying a property, fine, but and if it's just going to be a strict resi, not a problem. But you just got to be very careful what you're doing with the property that you're buying inside a self-managed super fund. You need to seek advice around that.
Okay, so here's one for you. Commercial property, someone buys it.
Mm-hmm.
I get this question all the time, the fit out.
Yep.
Right? So you buy the property in the self-managed super fund, you lease it to your own company.
Yep.
You've leased that to your own company and you need to do a fit out. You need to put a mezzanine in. You need to put some bathrooms in. You've bought an empty warehouse. You got to deck it out.
All that.
You're a plumbing business. You're a manufacturing business.
Want to put a mezz in, whatever it is.
What happens?
Yeah. So look, the lease is going to cover you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And generally with a commercial lease, that's all on the tenant, right? So as long as
so you pay for it out of the company.
Out of the company who's the tenant. Okay. We've got the landlord being the super fund. And as long as I have a legal document where it's defined in there, and generally they are, most commercial leases will literally be, the landlord's got to look after the walls and the roof.
Yeah.
The rest is on you.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we've got the legal document, that's the other thing we see is, what do you mean I need a lease?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Get the legals done right, and then you're not going to have any problems with your super fund with those.
ChatGPT's been good for those leases.
Yeah, please done. And again, next to your house, your super fund's, probably the most biggest asset you've got. I think you've got to have respect around that. And, lawyers,
that's a good way to put it.
Respect. Lawyers are like insurance. It's all great till shit's all over the ceiling, but if they're the money in the right place, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, no, I do think people disrespect the framework because it's a little bit gung ho, but at the same time, buying a business premises. And I did have one where they wanted to put a mezzanine in, but they weren't allowed to have the mezzanine touch the outer walls. They had to have it suspended. It wasn't allowed to be a permanent structure. It had to be suspended. So it was still permanent.
Yeah.
They were still able to use it and put a double level in, put the office up the top, and they were able to do everything they wanted to do. But the distinction was that under the rules of improvement to the property, you had to have it suspended.
Yep.
Now I'm sure there's shitloads of people out there that have gone and put in permanent structures in the building, and I'm sure that won't be a problem for a lot of them. But it was interesting to see that. Have you ever seen that kind of thing before?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's again, this is somewhat defined in the contracts, okay, at each level. But if it's part of the asset itself and you're improving the asset, there are very defined parts of the legislation that will talk about how the ATO interprets that.
Yeah.
And we need to understand what that is, because they're pretty good with a lot of it, but the great one they love is these contribution caps. As soon as you go over contribution caps, bang, we're at 47 cents in the dollar. And that's what they look at.
The Div 293?
Yep.
Is it 293, 296?
They're two different ones. Yep.
Right.
So the Div 293 is the one over the 250. That's based upon contributions over your $30,000.
And they're bang 47.
No, so what we're talking about is a little bit different. You're talking about a member as a member rather than an employee-member relationship. So they'll just divert your salary. This is not even considered as part of that. This is just looking at your 30,000 concessional contributions cap, and they'll have a crack at that. Then they'll move to non-concessional, and they'll have a crack at that too. So yeah.
So for anyone that hasn't looked into the super piece entirely, each member of a self-managed super fund or each person is allowed to allowed to contribute $30,000 per annum, and they get the concessional tax rate on those contributions. So if you're on 150 grand and you decide you want to max out your contributions, put in your 30K, that's a 15% tax on that.
That's correct. Yep.
And obviously it means you don't get taxed on that money in your personal name. However, if you exceed that and you make more than 250K, the government or the ATO will have
another 15%.
Another 15%.
But just remember, it also includes your superannuation contribution.
Yeah, right. So that's nice.
220 plus the 30 plus any fringe benefits plus.
Yeah. So if you're making good money, they're going to come and ream you.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the summary on that one. The SMSF space, moving on slightly. The SMSF is just a trust. It's just a trust with a different set of rules.
Absolutely. Spot.
Looking at normal trusts, right? So family trust, discretionary trust, unit trust, these things are coming out of the woodwork left, right, and center. And it's so interesting to be on my side of the fence and see the customers come to us with all their different structures. Some will just come with a family trust and they'll set up a company as a corporate trustee.
Yep.
So that when we approach a bank for new lending, we don't necessarily have to declare the personal liabilities, declare the trust liabilities as personal liabilities, which is a great tool for investors to maximize the serviceability. And we're using that method a lot for the right people that have strong cash flow. They set up a couple of properties in Trust A.
Yep.
Then they can go and set up another trust, we'll call it Trust B,
yep.
and go and buy 2 more properties with the exact same income. This is a fantastic tool to use, but anything that is used to the point it's exploited, it doesn't last, right? So let's say this lasts another few years, and right now banks are super aggressive, super bullish on it. It's not caused any problems. Wait until someone royally fucks up.
Yep, not a problem until it's a problem.
Yep, and then like you said before, it'll be a house of cards for that entire strategy. So while it's in play, and while we have such aggressive investment appetite in this country, what should we know about setting up these trusts? Because I've got a lot of people that have them already. They're potentially moving on to trust number 2. Some are moving on to trust number 3. What are some of the things we need to think about when you are assessing your risk moving into that? Moving into that style of investing.
Yep, understand. Look, I think the big one up here is understanding what the risk is and what the benefit is, right? So when we're taking a look at a bank's point of view for serviceability and accessibility, these sorts of things, there's a value there. As you said, there's a limitation where it stops and just looks at the event itself. Whereas, as you know, most other lending with banks, they'll look at the client, not the asset. And I think that's the one of the key benefits for it. I question the strategy when you're looking at mum and dad or whoever it is as their first property and maybe even the second property. Moving into this type of investment is expensive. You know, you probably need a 10% uplift in the property just to break even with all the costs going in. Then generally it's a negatively geared property, which is a fancy word for losing money. and one of the greatest,
it really is, but
one of the kickers for us under the current Australian tax legislation is that we're allowed to claim that against our other income. Therefore, I'm using my tax refund to help service that debt. Now, the problem in having it under a trust structure is that the losses are kept in that. I cannot distribute a loss from a trust. I have to have it sit there and wait till it makes.
So in layman's terms, there's no benefit for that negatively geared property sitting in the trust to your own personal income.
None whatsoever.
Yep.
So I either have to wait till we hit year 7 till we've got a positively geared trust, or I sell the property. And again, it's a poor use of those losses because I'm getting half of that capital gain tax free. So in other words, I'm only getting half the benefit of the losses if I save them up to when I sell them.
What would happen if you did that exact same thing in your personal name?
Yeah. So basically, depending upon the tax rate that you're on, obviously converts to the cash benefit, you know, make the maths easy for the accountant. Got a $10,000 negatively geared loss. I've got a $4,700 refund if I'm on the top marginal tax bracket. Okay. Now that's going to assist in either putting food on the table or paying the bank back. Okay. I'm taking those straight away. Then when I sell the property, if I've held it for 366 days, I'll get half of that gain tax free. The other half I'm including in my taxable income.
Yeah. The part where you said putting food on the table. So one of the most popular strategies that we use with our mum and dad investors, if they've got 1 investment property or 2 investment properties and they are negatively geared, let's say you got mum and dad on 200K combined, they've got tax losses against those properties of $25,000. They're able to get a tax return of 7 or 8 grand. And then we dock that off the home loan.
Love it.
So that is one of the most popular things, but obviously we can't do that so easily in the trust.
No, absolutely. So what we would normally do with the exact same situation is look at a PAYG variation, whereas instead of the accountant look like a rock star at the end of the year, giving you that 7 grand, is that we lodge that form with your tax return and vary your PAYG.
So if that's expected again, you can just lower your tax and increase your net income on a monthly basis.
Every pay packet.
Yeah.
So it's amortized over the pay packet. It comes in.
Okay.
And then we take that you're getting that benefit.
You have to do that for a year first.
12 months.
Lodge your tax return.
Yep.
You get your big chunky tax return.
I don't have to. No. If I've got a client come in nice and early, hey, Dave, we've bought a rental property. What have I got to do? We can do that right then. I don't have to wait.
I didn't know you could do that straight up. Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's handy to know.
Okay, so that'll be a part of, if you're buying that property, that first residential property, get in contact with your accountant, get that PAYG variation in now, and take that. And as you said, from a wealth creation is getting that every pay period, not putting it against your tax deductible debt, but taking it to your non-tax deductible principal place of residence debt. And
which is, and the education piece starts right from the beginning to say that debt only goes in one direction ever, and that's down.
Yep.
And then your investment debt typically goes up or stays the same until that home loan's knocked over. On that piece, the credit conditions, right? They're completely different in the trust environment. We've got some lenders out there at the moment that are so useful because we can park trust after trust after trust, and we can maximize personal borrowing capacity. We can use a lot of different avenues for people to build their portfolios out. With one of the things that people will often overlook is the fact that because you have no deductions in that trust against your personal income, your serviceability is actually chopped. Now, it's chopped by about 20%. So it's quite a big difference. So let's say you've got mum and dad who can buy an investment property for $750,000 in their personal name. Mm-hmm. They can probably only get about $550 in the trust because there is no tax benefit that we can allocate to them. Some lenders, very few, will allow us to use negative gearing in the trust only up to the rental income limit, right? Which makes sense. Yeah. So there is a small benefit, but the large majority, I'm talking 95% of lenders, there is no tax benefit. So you need to recognize that if you go get your serviceability done, we have a lot of people that will come in and say, oh, can you give me my borrowing capacity? Yep, no worries, John. It's 750,000. You're good to go. Yep. And then they'll go away and set up a trust and go to buy the property, and it's all of a sudden it's 550.
Yep.
So even knowing nothing has changed with their income, it kind of has. So we need to be mindful of that, guys, that when you do go and set up a trust to do this, your borrowing capacity will be impacted. That is important to remember.
Yeah. So just covering off on that, mate, is as I said, I do see the benefit. I think for most people, it's not relevant with their first and possibly second property, just because they need that tax refund as cash flow to support either lifestyle, food on the table, or serviceability. But I think moving on from that, I can see it. But we've got to remember these guys that are coming in, the property gurus are looking to create 5, 10, 20 properties.
Yeah.
And yes, when we get into that scale, it has merit.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems is that if you go and exhaust your personal serviceability and then you go to a trust, it doesn't work because you still have to expense the personal balance sheet.
That's right.
So you kind of need to go and understand, what is my objective here over the next 7 years, 10 years? Don't think about what's my objective this year, next year. And if your objective is to go out and get to 5, 6 properties, then you probably need to pull the trigger on your trust lending from the get-go. Don't go and exhaust your personal lending and then go to let's move to a trust. No, mate, it's back to front. We can't. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So all of that personal debt sits on your personal credit file. It is visible for the world to see.
Great point there, mate. So probably take a look at what the end game is before you start.
Yeah. We're now seeing our younger investors come back for property number 2 or 3 because of the growth they've had in your Queensland markets, South Australian markets, and to another degree, the residential markets in regions. So one of the stats we'll cover off on later is a mind-blowing statistic from a little Victorian town that has absolutely smashed it this year, but we'll get to that. One of the other
for parochialism going there, is that right?
No, it's not Shepparton. What I wanted to touch on last was just looking at a successful investment in a self-managed super fund. Can you think of any that come to mind where someone has just nailed it? So that you've got time to think. I had one investor who purchased a commercial property in Mornington, purchased it in one of those industrial zones, but then the local council changed the rules for that zoning where it would be mixed use. So now a bunch of breweries moved into that area, a bunch of coffee roasters and, marketing agencies. And all of a sudden it went from manufacturing and basically storage to a really cool industrial hub with these awesome places and food and drinks and everything like that. They bought it for like 1.1 million. So that was in 2019, so in 6 years, they were able to sell that for nearly 2.
Yep.
That was an incredible investment. So that was someone who just nailed that industrial piece for that entire period of time. They used that for storage for their business.
Yep.
And, it just fucking ticked every box.
So look, I think probably a little bit outside of my zone of expertise, but I always say to clients, take a look at town planning, take a look at where the train lines are. Especially where they are at the end of train lines, because they tend to change the zoning around those and then move that in. We allow them to do that. And, I don't see a Bunnings or a McDonald's going out of business, mate.
No.
So take a look at where they're going up.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I know that's been a rule of thumb for 30 years, but it's still not wrong, is it?
No. The only other thing I'll throw on the end of that, right? These are long-term investments. And property is an incredible way to accumulate financial wealth. Not a great one when you're in retirement. They can't pay you a pension one brick at a time. Doesn't taste that good. So at some point it's got to be sold. And we've got to remember is that if we're coming in under a self-managed super fund structure and we're looking to hold on to that till we retire. Now, the legislation says once I attain the age of 60 and I've got an event being that I've retired. Now, that can be I'm not working full time. Then I meet all the conditions of release. I can turn on a pension. Then everything in my super fund is tax-free. So if I've got a property there, a commercial property in your situation, what do we go from 1 to 2 mil?
It was 1.1 to nearly 2. I think it was 1.8, 1.9.
So I'm taking all of that tax-free. I don't have to pay any tax.
And this is why I think it's the greatest investment vehicle we get. Unfortunately, the shitty thing is we can't touch the fucking thing until we're 60. But
even people like you will get old one day, mate.
I know. But look, I think it's one of those things. If you do it right, you can.
If you do it right, it is literally, as I said, the most powerful tool accountants and all of us have available.
Yeah.
So I think take a look at that end game. And
like I said, now that the banks are starting to, I believe NAB and potentially CommBank for high net worth clients are thinking about moving back into the SMSF space, not going anywhere. But
tells you how much noise they're making then.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well, they're just watching all this business get written by the non-banks who got behind SMSFs and they stayed true to the course.
Yep.
I would be reluctant to go back to a major bank now after they left us all in the lurch and made us refinance. They did not give any discounts to any of their clients from 2017 through to now. I refinanced an AMP loan just recently and they're still sitting up at nearly 10%.
Wow.
And it's just like they just completely neglected the portfolio, in which case I have no desire to put any clients back into them.
Do that.
Why would you repay that kind of a favour?
The SMS space is making noise again, as you mentioned, and it's not just from the banks, it's from the legislators as well. They're getting pressure from the retail and industry funds in regards to how much money is coming out of them and moving into this space.
Yeah.
So this is on.
Well, they've got a fucking job. And they need to get better returns than what I can get managing myself. So if they can do that, by all means, I don't want the extra jobs on my jobs list. If they can do what I can do, I'll leave it with them. But anyway, mate, just in light of time, Georgia, have we got the Prezzo up? Is that already displayed? Can we go to the first page, please? So this one should be Darwin tops the nation. This is off Cotality's quarterly report was released 2 days ago. Monkey throwing a dart at a dartboard. That's how easy it's been to invest in property in Australia in the last 5 years. Now we're looking at Darwin doing what the other capitals did. It was probably left behind a little bit in the early years, in the early stages. But the one thing that stands out to me is the fact that not only is their return being so big at more than 20% for the 12 months, but the yields are huge. They're massive. And even on their houses as well as the units are off the charts. But we know Darwin and we know Perth to be boom and bust markets.
Absolutely, yeah.
is this now, has the trend been changed? And is this now sustainability, or are we thinking that there is a short-term boom and a potential retraction?
Question, and I'm not too sure we're going to know for another 2 or 3 years the answer to that, but history does have, some chance of repeating itself there.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see the demographers break up of the core of the population. Who is there these days? We all know no one wants to live in Victoria. They're all bloody leaving. So maybe Gold Coast is off the menu. We've moved to Darwin.
Yeah.
But obviously.
Have you been to Darwin?
No.
Darwin's fucking awesome. It's by far, it was the most, I had no expectations. I went up there for a barramundi fishing trip with the missus and a mate, and we spent the week, nearly a week up there, just on a week. Everything about it, awesome.
Yeah.
Everything about it. But anyway, I'm not a travel agent, so we'll get back to this. Perth, Brisbane lead the pack. Is that the next page there? So this Perth is blowing my mind. We've had it perform exceptionally well for the first 3 years. It went bang, like at 76, 77% over a period of 3 or 4 years, and we're still pumping 4% quarterly growth. Now, I was over there.
It needed to. It was shit for a long time.
Yeah. I was over there. You and I were up in Brisbane for the Xerocon conference in early September.
Yep.
How many cranes in the sky? Fucking everywhere. The whole place is full of them.
They're expecting a lot of people for this Olympics, that's for sure.
I don't know. Is this going to be where the Olympics is hosted for the rest of eternity? No. Because the amount of growth, the amount of prosperity you can feel in the air up there is just insane. I can't see Brisbane stopping. I don't see it stopping as a growth prospect. Perth, I do see slowing down. I was over in Perth as well. Definitely didn't get the vibes I was getting out of Brisbane. However, I definitely got vibes that it was changing, but I'm still in the camp.
I think Perth's still going to be on that, mines and minerals sort of boom bust. It'll be up and down with all of that. And at the moment they're turning everything off. So I think I'd probably support that opinion.
Yeah, no, it's just a beautiful place. I love heading over there for 4 or 5 days at a time, but it's so isolated. I think it is the most isolated capital city in the world.
South Africans got to have somewhere to go, mate.
So yeah, supply crunch or long-term shift. I think Brisbane long-term shift. I think Perth probably just a supply crunch. And then we have vacancy rates and the rental crisis. This one is honestly, this is a problem. So we have these commitments from the government in every state to go and provide bigger housing supply. The 1.1% of vacant units nationally and 1.4% nationally in every asset, in every type of dwelling.
Yep.
That is insane. That is incredible.
It's a big problem, massive problem. And I don't know that they've got the right answers for it. And even if they do, there's other mechanisms here that are limiting it.
I think there was an article in the Fin Review a couple of days ago. There was a line it was an apartment in Bondi, and there was something like 80 people deep.
Yep.
Just to get into the property to have a look. Like, why would you bother? You would turn around and go, fuck, I'm just going to go get a beer.
No.
This is not going to happen. So in that particular case, how will the investors balance yield versus growth right now?
It's in their favour.
Yeah, I still think it's a matter of you still throwing darts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
for me, it comes all the way back to that problem to the insurers that at our level, the insurances for builders are being cancelled or not given increased limits because they don't want to. They don't want to have that risk.
Planning permits have obviously been changed. I think for side-by-sides in Melbourne, they're pushing them through on that express program. That is a good thing. We can't be waiting 12 months to get plans to chop a block in half. We cannot be doing that. That's just...
The banks have...
We've got fucking computers now. Surely they can get it done quicker than that.
It'll have to come all the way back to the insurers. If they want more people to build, they've got to insure them. So right now, I think you've still got another 3 to 5 years of them throwing darts and getting it right because it just comes back to demand and supply.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of method to the madness when you have these statistics to work with.
Yep.
Where the where the experience comes in is when these figures aren't producing the way they're producing. Now, there's been there's a very big camp of people that have a doomsday reckoning coming in 2026, 2027, somewhere around there. You look at the stock market hitting all-time high, all-time high, all-time high. You look at this property market in Australia hitting all-time high, all-time high. You look at states and cities and regional centres getting to $1 million for a property in fucking Shepparton. There is, it's just crazy to think that that is even a thing when you could go back 5 years. But again, it's happened. Now, if there was a reckoning, I think there is probably room for everything to fall. The fact that liquidity was stripped out of the market, but now we have more cash in circulation than any other point in time in history after what happened in COVID. We've just done that again.
Yeah.
Essentially. But we've been able to maintain lower inflation. We've been able to maintain very low unemployment. So everything is suggesting that this will not stop.
It's going to be rare that the accountant's the optimist in the room. But you've still got all of the market forces pushing demand and supply at the end of the day, right? A, we all know there's no supply.
Yeah.
B, we've got migration that they're trying to do catch up over COVID. So you've still got a lot of people coming in. You've got migration. We've got first home buyers. I've got divorcees. None of these things are going away. There's no,
no, I agree.
Zombie apocalypse that's going to happen.
I do agree, and I think the one of the biggest differences that nothing's been sort of laid on the table. This is happening now, but the 2007-2008 issue was largely fraud based.
Yes,
versus this being not this like this.
These were overvalued. And
yeah,
okay.
Private equity markets are apparently overvalued, but
these places were empty to start with.
Yes. Yeah. True. Yeah. So these that's what I mean. We do have legitimate people that need these dwellings and they needed them yesterday. So I can't see that stopping. I do not think it's FOMO. I think it's people just recognizing that there is still money on the table to be made. First home buyers. First home buyers have been massive in the last 3 months. We've had a massive influx. I'm going to go through, are we just on the page with the writing? So the first home guarantee, buy with a 5% deposit, no LMI. Now, this is really one of the best schemes that's ever been produced by the government. This is going to be amazing. It's obviously been around for 3 years already. We've done a heap of them already. One of the biggest challenges was if you earned more than $120,000 or if you as a couple earned more than $200,000, you were not able to qualify for the grant.
Yep.
The problem is anyone who wants to spend more than $600,000 probably has to be more than those incomes. So what I wanted to do is I want to compare what it looked like until last week versus what it looks like now. So can we go to the first table? That one. Okay, so this table here, we can see what it would have cost someone and what they would have required. I want to take your attention to the deposit. The deposit for a $600,000 house, you needed $63,500. You could get away with a little bit less. There are some shitty products out there that will cost you a fortune where you could get away with 5%, 6%.
That's including all our costs, isn't it, mate? Stamp duty.
That's everything. Here you get stamp duty waived, $63.5K will get you into a property worth $600,000. You get your mortgage insurance premium over here on the right for $11,000.
Thanks for coming.
The interest rate's the other thing. You're at 5.94. That's what ING are offering for those buyers between 90 and 95. It's pretty fucking good, to be honest. But let's go down the table. If you go for a $900,000 property, which is what a lot of young professionals are going for, you needed $145,000. How long is it going to take a young professional to save $145,000 unless you've got the bank of mum and dad?
Yeah, look, that's obviously going to take a fair bit, especially not to point fingers at generations and expense habits and these sorts of things, but that's not a small amount of money. Absolutely.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And look at the mortgage insurance premium, just over $21,000.
That's the real killer.
And your repayments are at $4,900, right? First home guarantee comes in, income caps get removed. All of a sudden, we have an entirely new market available. We go to the next page. For that exact same person to buy a $900,000 property, your deposit has come down by nearly a third.
Yep.
You've got no mortgage insurance.
Which is, for me, the big win.
Massive.
That's just bite you in the bum, that one.
And it's just, you're essentially just giving, yes, it's protecting the bank. It's not protecting you. No. You're paying for it. But anyway, that industry is, I wouldn't be buying shares in Genworth or QBE for that purpose. But look at this. For a $600,000 property now, you can get away with a deposit as little as $33,500, and that includes your conveyancing. That includes everything down to the mortgage registration fee of $130.
Yep.
So your loan is also on a lower interest rate, 5.79, the give or take. No mortgage insurance. This formula now, for someone who had $60,000, their budget has now gone from under 600. And now they're sitting at around 700. So the risk is that we push the market between 700 and 900 to $1 million, and everything goes up. But
look, there's an argument for that. But,
it's better than what it was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the repayment of $5,000 is not very dissimilar, but you got no mortgage insurance, lower rate, and you're actually borrowing more. So I think it's a kick-ass. I think it's a kick-ass situation. The super savings scheme.
Yeah, I was going to say,
coupled with that.
when you map in that first home super saver scheme as well, where you can be getting $50,000 plus the return in it. Yes, there's a little bit of tax to pay when you pull it out, depending on how the money went in. It's going to at least halve the time to save for that. Yeah.
Do you want to give us a quick rundown? Like if someone was to, so let's say you got a couple, they're both on 100 grand each.
Yep.
They engage who to get the super savings scheme set up?
Yeah, so it's quite bizarre in regards to that. So let's talk about the start of it, and then it's sort of mapped out at the end, to be honest with you. So it's contributions that you're making into your super that can go towards this super saver scheme. It's not your employer's 12% super guarantee charge, okay? So you can be putting that in as a non-concessional. In other words, you don't want to claim a tax deduction for it, or you can put it in as a concessional, which would be our advice to look at, okay? When, you're talking about, what would we say, 100,000?
100 grand, yeah.
Yep. So you're basically on about 32 cents, I suppose, let's call it that, including the Medicare levy at that rate. I'm getting that as a tax deduction. I'm claiming that on my tax. I might as well have the government pay some of this, right?
Yeah.
So there's 32% less than they're getting. It goes into your super. You can put in up to $15,000 per annum, but we need to make sure that we're not going over the $30,000 cap.
So if you're on 150 and you put in more than 15,
make it easy for the account, mate. 100.
Yeah. So
keep it nice round numbers. So we've got 15 grand. If you're on 100, employer's putting in 12. So
you can put in 18.
I'm 15.
15.
Right. 15 per annum, right?
You do that for 2 years and you're at the 600K purchase price.
Not quite. So what we're looking at there is you lose 15% when it goes in.
Which is cheaper than your income tax.
Absolutely. And so the after tax amount is what I can take out plus the earnings whilst it was in there.
Right.
There's no minimum amount.
Oh, you can take your returns.
The returns comes out as well.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so it's a cap of 50 plus earnings. And so there's no minimum and there's no maximum. You'll go through those requirements. There is tax to pay on the way out. It is taxable income on the way out. They will give you a 30% credit against that. So for as long as we're still in that 32 cents, I'm neither here.
What happens if your wage went up to 120 in that?
Yes. So there's a game of mathematics there, right? So suddenly, I'm decide to do this in my 30s and do the right thing. My boss thinks I'm okay and I get a pay rise, and 5 years later, bang, I'm up to 190. Then I'm pulling out my 50 plus my earnings, could be another 60 grand. Well, that 60 grand is going to be at the highest marginal tax rate. Okay. So that's at 47 cents. They'll give me a credit of 30, but I'm still losing 17%.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you're doing these numbers of what have I got for my deposit?
So it's not a free swing.
You're in front.
It's a good swing.
You're in front. Okay. You're in front at least 15 to 30%.
Yeah.
And whilst it's in there, it's, earning growth as well.
Yeah.
But just be careful that it's not all yours when you're doing your cash flow for your deposit. I've got to pay something to the tax man as well in that process.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate you running through that one. It's something I think is probably underutilized. The last couple of points I wanted to cover off on, which was interesting from that article, was the affordability. The affordability, if you own a property in Sydney, your affordability ratio is at 9.6 times your income. Could you imagine that? Like, just that is absurd to think that is
what were we about 3 times in the 70s?
I think it was probably 3 times even up until the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, there you go.
But that was just mind blowing to me. So investors adapting to affordability caps, don't buy in Sydney. That's essentially it.
Or ask for a big pay rise on the transfer.
That is it. And the last topic, mate, was just a regional boom town. So Albany, obviously southern WA, that's been pumping. I have a mate from over there, and he said place changed completely.
Yep.
It's just dynamite. Mildura was the Victorian regional town that's put on some very impressive statistics. I know that a hell of a lot of buyers advocates are pushing the clients into Mildura. I was speaking to an agent from Mildura, and he's like, I've literally had to block some buyers advocates because they are just hounding me. Again, massive supply squeeze. They are developing new land out there, but it
makes sense.
slow.
You know, the land's cheap or cheaper.
So you got Bendigo, Ballarat, Albury, Shepparton. They all posted gains when the rest of Victoria went down.
I've been a massive fan of those areas for a long time. For people looking to get a footprint in the market, I think it's a great opportunity.
I reckon they're awesome for commercial.
They're not towns anymore. These things are cities. They've got a heartbeat all by themselves.
Yeah, and I think that the commercial landscape out there, like you get good tenants, there's great industry, there's business, there's the trade and construction industry. It'll get a good tenant in that space, and I reckon it's a really good investment for the lower price point. You get really good yields, really good rental yields.
And that's used to be what it was, right? It used to be a cash play in and around those. But as you can see, the data will tell you the last 10 years, the capital growth around these been huge.
I buy an apartment block, 6 apartments in Shepparton for 1.3 million, was producing like over 120 grand in rental income.
Yeah, they're traditionally, that's what they were, a great cash play, but I think they're far more than that.
Mate, that is a wrap. I thank you so much for your time, so much for coming in. Unless you've got anything else to add.
No, mate. No,
I think we're getting a bit thirsty.
A pleasure to be here. Yep. The tummy's growling.
Yep. Very good, David. Thanks so much for your expertise, your time, and all your insights. I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point. And thank you everyone for joining in and listening to us dribble some shit for 45 odd minutes.
Good shit though.
We will see you again next time, and we'll post some videos and some shorts this one. So thank you again for everything. We will chat to you soon. Have a good one.